That crunch beneath Ria's boots, not ice, broken glass. Their city isn't dead. It breathes, hums, watches. And when they mocked us in their tongue, thinking we were deaf, I answered. The air went still. Two alien sisters, elegant and cold, froze mid-sentence. What comes after a first contact gambit that shouldn't have worked? That sound caught Ria first. Not the crunch of packed snow or frost, but something sharper. The ice beneath her boots fractured in clean lines, splintering like tempered glass. Each step sent cracks radiating outward, patterns that seemed too deliberate for natural formation. The wind didn't howl so much as it whispered, cutting through thermal layers with a precision that felt personal. 6 months in a tin can with 11 other souls does things to people. You learn each other's breathing patterns, sleeping habits, which jokes land and which ones don't. That kind of closeness either bonds you or breaks you. We were lucky, mostly. 12 people who could read each other's silences. That helped when the environmental sensors started going haywire. The atmospheric readouts made no sense. Oxygen levels fluctuating between breathable and lethal within seconds. Pressure gradients that shouldn't exist on a planetary surface. Thermal scans showed cold spots moving against the wind. Our engineer kept tapping her display like it might just need a good whack to start behaving. No such luck. You ever walk into a room and feel watched? Multiply that by a planet. The ice didn't just reflect light, it seemed to absorb it, then release it at odd angles. Shadows moved when nothing cast them. The deeper we went into the canyon, the heavier that feeling got. Like walking through someone's home uninvited while they watched from the walls. Jokes started around kilometer 3, dark, brittle things. The linguist muttered something about property taxes on haunted real estate. The geologist kept making cracks about the HOA from hell. It was that or acknowledge the prickling on the back of your neck. Humor as armor against the unease building with every step. Then the ice began changing. Not melting, reshaping. Patterns emerged in the fracture lines, too geometric for random thermal contraction. Hexagons giving way to precise angles. Then spirals that twisted deeper than the light could penetrate. Our scanners showed the structures continuing downward for kilometers, perfectly organized despite the surface chaos. That's when we saw the first glimmer. Not a reflection, a source. Deep in the ice, something pulsed with a soft blue light. Then another farther down the canyon. They weren't random. They formed a path. An invitation. Or a warning. The ground vibrated with a low hum, the kind you feel in your teeth more than hear. The ice crystals on the surface began aligning, shifting from chaotic scatter to ordered patterns. They caught the fading sunlight and threw it back in prismatic arcs that illuminated the canyon walls. Those walls weren't natural formations. Too smooth, too angled? The striations ran vertically when they should have been horizontal from glacial movement. There were patterns in the ice that looked like circuitry frozen mid-pulse. Our bioscanners registered energy signatures that matched nothing in our databases. By the time we reached the canyon's throat, the ice had stopped looking like ice altogether. It became a crystalline matrix structured and purposeful, the pulsing lights synchronized into a rhythm that felt like breathing. The city wasn't ahead of us anymore. It was all around us, waking up. Our engineer stared at her structural scanner like it had betrayed her. The spire ahead curved at impossible angles, defying every load-bearing calculation in the database. No visible support structures, no reinforcement patterns, just smooth crystalline surfaces that should have collapsed under their own weight. She kept recalibrating, getting the same impossible results. The math simply didn't work here. Bioluminescent veins threaded through the walls, pulsing with soft blue light. They ran in complex patterns that reminded you of circulatory systems or neural networks. The rhythm wasn't random, it had a pattern, a tempo that shifted when we moved closer. Like the city was adjusting its heartbeat to our presence. The light didn't just illuminate. It seemed to carry something. Information, maybe. Or energy. Platforms materialized from the air when we needed them. One moment empty space, the next a solid surface forming from converging light patterns. No visible mechanism, no transition phase. They just appeared exactly where you'd want to step next. Our gravimetric sensors went wild. The display started showing these little alien emojis. Confused faces, question marks, spinning icons. The tech blamed cosmic radiation affecting the firmware. I wasn't so sure. The hum settled deep in your bones. Not just sound, vibration that resonated through your body at specific frequencies. You could feel it in your molars, your sternum, the marrow of your legs. It changed when you moved through different areas. Higher pitches near the spires, deeper tones in the open plazas. The acoustics were too perfect. Sound carried with unnatural clarity, but only in certain directions. Text appeared on surfaces when you weren't looking directly at them. Peripheral vision would catch elaborate scripts flowing across walls, but when you turned your head, they'd dissolve into patterns of light. Our linguist tried recording it, but the cameras only captured static. The writing seemed to know when it was being observed. It preferred to communicate through glimpses, hints, suggestions. This wasn't architecture, not in any sense we understood. The structures responded to sound, to movement, to presence. The materials themselves were wrong. Our spectrometers registered elements that didn't match any known atomic weights or bonding patterns. Substances that oscillated between solid and energy states. Matter that responded to specific harmonic frequencies. The city designed itself around acoustics. Curved surfaces that focused sound into precise beams. Chambers that amplified certain frequencies while canceling others. Everything served the physics of vibration. You could whisper in one chamber and be heard clearly 3 levels up through specific openings. The entire place functioned like a massive musical instrument, with us as the unwitting players. Our science officer kept muttering about concert halls, how ancient cultures built spaces where sound could travel incredible distances with perfect clarity. This was that concept taken to its extreme. A planetary-scale acoustic environment where structure and sound were inseparable. The bioluminescence, the materialization of platforms, the gravitational anomalies, all secondary to the primary function of harmonic manipulation. The periodic table needed new pages. Elements that existed in stable states we'd never conceived. Materials that changed properties based on vibrational input. Crystalline structures that could be solid matter one moment and pure energy transmission the next. Our instruments logged the data while throwing constant error flags. The fundamental laws of physics weren't just being broken here. They were being rewritten by something that understood resonance better than we understood matter itself. Our atmospheric analysis missed one critical detail. The air contained trace helium isotopes with unique quantum signatures that bonded with human vocal cords. The effect was immediate. Our chief linguist opened with the formal first contact greeting we'd practiced for years. What came out sounded like a cartoon character asking for a balloon animal. You try maintaining diplomatic dignity when your voice jumps 2 octaves. Every solemn declaration about peaceful intentions emerged as a squeaky parody of itself. The head of Xenocultural Studies, a man with 20 years of interstellar negotiation experience, sounded like he'd been sucking on helium balloons before the meeting. His carefully prepared speech about mutual understanding became comedy gold. The crew struggled not to laugh. Professionalism warred with the absurdity of our situation. You'd hear these high-pitched declarations about galactic harmony, while seeing grown adults biting their lips to keep straight faces. The medical officer had to turn away during a particularly solemn moment, shoulders shaking silently. Even the security team, trained to maintain stoic expressions, had tears in their eyes from suppressed laughter. The Athrani architecture responded to the altered frequencies. The bioluminescent patterns in the walls pulsed faster when we spoke. The harmonic resonance of the city seemed to tune itself to our squeaking voices. Platforms materialized with different textures when high-pitched sounds echoed through the chambers. The environment was adapting to our accidental comedy routine. Our attempts at seriousness kept backfiring. The more formal we tried to be, the funnier it became. The cultural attaché's explanation of human art traditions came out like a children's television host describing finger painting. The lead scientist's breakdown of quantum mechanics sounded like a sped-up educational cartoon. We were unraveling centuries of diplomatic protocol through vocal absurdity. Something shifted in the atmosphere. The tension that had been building since we entered the city began to dissipate. The unintentional humor broke through the formal barriers we'd been trying to navigate. Where careful phrasing and rehearsed greetings had failed, squeaky voices and awkward pauses succeeded. The city's harmonics softened, becoming less imposing, more curious. The Athrani structures began mirroring our vocal patterns. Light pulses synced with speech rhythms. Wall patterns shifted to match vocal inflections. The entire environment became part of the conversation, responding to tone rather than content. Our high-pitched attempts at communication were being accepted on their own terms, not judged against some ideal of proper diplomatic discourse. We stopped trying to fight the vocal change and leaned into it. The communications officer started using hand gestures to emphasize points, looking like a mime with voice modulation issues. The engineer began demonstrating basic physics concepts with exaggerated movements that matched his squeaky explanations. The whole interaction became more physical, more expressive, less constrained by formal language. The city's response became increasingly interactive. Platforms would form to demonstrate points. Light patterns would illustrate concepts we struggled to explain. The harmonic hum of the environment began incorporating elements of our speech patterns, creating a weird audio feedback loop where the city seemed to be learning our comedic timing. By the time we reached the central chamber, the interaction had transformed completely. What began as a serious first contact scenario had become something closer to improvisational theater. The barriers weren't just down. They'd been replaced by a shared recognition of the absurdity inherent in cross-species communication. The Athrani city wasn't judging our capabilities anymore. It was enjoying the show. The translation array lit up with error messages before the first syllable finished processing. 7 years of linguistic analysis, cultural modeling, and algorithmic refinement shattered in under 7 seconds. The system's status display flooded with urgent disclaimers, grammatical structures incompatible with known syntax models, phoneme clusters that violated established acoustic physics, semantic frameworks that required quantum-level processing the hardware couldn't support. Our lead linguist watched her screens with dawning horror. The Athrani language didn't just use musical harmonics. It built meaning directly into vibrational patterns that changed based on surrounding acoustics. A single word could mean 12 different things depending on the resonance of the chamber it was spoken in. The translation software tried to force their fluid syntax into rigid subject-verb-object boxes that simply didn't apply here. Warning tags scrolled too fast to read. Tonal inflection exceeds processing parameters. Semantic, drift detected at 400% acceptable. Thresholds. Syntax tree collapsing under recursive. Embedding. The system kept trying to apply human language rules to something fundamentally different. It was like trying to map ocean currents using desert navigation charts. The real problem was the living context. Athrani speech incorporated real-time environmental feedback. The city's hum, the pulse of bioluminescent patterns, even the slight pressure changes in the air, all contributed to meaning. Our software treated language as isolated acoustic signals. Theirs integrated everything from gravitational fluctuations to light frequencies. Human linguistic concepts proved brutally inadequate. We had no frameworks for vocabulary that changed meaning based on the listener's position relative to the speaker, no models for sentences whose grammatical structure shifted if spoken near certain crystalline formations. The very idea of nouns and verbs seemed childish when faced with a language where sound and environment were inseparable. The translation array began overheating. Cooling systems whined as processors struggled with conceptual frameworks that required simultaneous analysis of acoustics, thermodynamics, and quantum states. Status reports flashed red, system integrity compromised, memory buffers overflowing, core linguistic databases corrupted by recursive logic loops. Our communications specialist made the call 7 minutes in. He shut down the main translation engine before it could damage itself permanently. The sudden silence in our comms gear felt louder than the error alarms. 12 people standing in an alien city with nothing but broken software and cartoon voices for communication. That's when the realization hit. We'd approached this wrong from the beginning. First contact protocols assumed technology could bridge conceptual gaps, but some divides are too fundamental for algorithms. The Athrani didn't just speak a different language. They experienced reality through different perceptual filters. Sound wasn't just communication for them. It was architecture, physics, consciousness itself. We switched to observational mode. Instead of trying to translate, we started mirroring. The linguist began repeating the pulse patterns she saw on the walls. The engineer matched the harmonic frequencies with his own voice, squeaky as it was. We stopped trying to force their reality into our boxes and started learning their patterns through imitation. The city responded immediately. Light patterns synchronized with our attempts. Platforms formed to guide our movements. The environment became less hostile, more instructional. We weren't foreign objects anymore. We were clumsy students, but students nonetheless. The shift from technological dependence to raw observation changed everything. We stopped looking for words and started learning the music. The city's harmonics shifted. 2 distinct voices emerged from the ambient hum, feminine and clear like crystal bells ringing through still air. They spoke to each other, not to us. Their tone held the casual disregard of researchers discussing lab specimens. We were the exhibit. They were the observers leaning against the glass. Our partial translation caught fragments. They mentioned observation logs spanning thousands of species, catalog numbers, behavioral classifications, evolutionary trajectories. One voice noted our persistent use of primitive energy signatures with mild academic interest. The other remarked on our quaint attempts at harmonic manipulation, like a patron commenting on child's artwork. They critiqued our technology with surgical precision. Our scanners were crude vibrational blunt instruments. Our environmental suits demonstrated amusing material redundancy. Even our walking formation showed predictable herd mentality. Patterns. Every piece of equipment, every procedure we developed over decades, became evidence of our limitations. The term primitive cognitive matrices appeared multiple times. They discussed neural architecture constraints like engineers reviewing obsolete hardware. Human brains couldn't process multidimensional harmonics properly. Our consciousness operated on flat perceptual planes. We experienced reality like creatures who could only see in 2 dimensions trying to comprehend sculpture. Their mockery wasn't malicious. It carried the detached curiosity of scientists studying simple organisms. One voice wondered why we bothered with physical interfaces when thought alone could manipulate matter. The other speculated about our attachment to tactile feedback as an evolutionary dead end. They found our methodology charmingly antiquated. The power dynamic became painfully clear. We weren't partners in discovery here. We were subjects in an ongoing study, temporary occupants in their galactic archive. Their casual conversation revealed they'd observed humanity for centuries, logging our development alongside countless other species. First contact wasn't a milestone for them, just another data entry. Our equipment suddenly seemed clumsy and loud. The humming scanners, the blinking lights, the bulky suits, everything designed for human comfort and efficiency looked primitive against their seamless integration with the environment. They didn't need tools because their consciousness interacted directly with reality. We were still fumbling with crude extensions of ourselves. The sisters' tones blended aristocratic elegance with scientific detachment. They spoke with the easy confidence of beings who'd mastered realities we couldn't even perceive. Their curiosity felt genuine but distant, like mathematicians observing interesting patterns in random number sequences. We were the patterns, not the mathematicians. Resolution settled over the crew like cold water. This wasn't negotiation or mutual discovery. This was assessment. We were being evaluated against standards we didn't understand, by criteria we couldn't meet. Every moment since landing had been a test we were failing through sheer incompatibility of perception. The city's architecture reinforced the imbalance. They existed within the environment. We moved through it as foreign objects, the way light bent around them differently, how sound resonated with their presence but dampened around ours. Even the air seemed to part for them while resisting our passage. We were visitors in a home that acknowledged our presence but not our significance. Our cultural attaché looked at the ground, her professional pride visibly shaken. The security team tightened formation instinctively, recognizing threat assessment protocols being used against them. The science officer stared at his useless instruments with something approaching grief. 7 years of preparation, and we were just another entry in some cosmic catalog. The voices continued their discussion, now comparing our cognitive limitations to another species they'd observed. Their tone remained politely interested, completely unconcerned with whether we understood or not. They knew we couldn't comprehend their full conversation any more than insects could understand human speech. The translation software had failed because some gaps can't be bridged by technology alone. The first sister's voice carried no malice, only clinical certainty. She explained how human neural architecture couldn't process harmonic reality. Our brains were linear processors trying to decode multidimensional information. Basic Athrani structural harmonics alone should have overloaded our cognitive matrices. The city's deep vibrational patterns operated on frequencies our minds physically couldn't register. Like creatures born deaf trying to comprehend music, they spoke with the patience of teachers explaining basic concepts to children. One sister compared our limitations to insects trying to understand orbital mechanics. The other noted how even our advanced translation attempts demonstrated fundamental perceptual gaps. We weren't just failing to communicate. We lacked the biological hardware to experience their reality properly. The problem wasn't linguistic. It was neurological. Our science officer stared at his hands like he'd never seen them before. The medical specialist kept touching her temples unconsciously. You could see the crew confronting their own biological constraints. 7 years of intensive preparation, language training, cultural studies, all rendered meaningless by the simple fact that human brains evolved differently. Our entire concept of intelligence felt suddenly provincial. The sisters detailed specific limitations. Human auditory processing capped at frequencies far below Athrani communication ranges. Our neural pathways couldn't handle information embedded in harmonic resonances. Even our visual perception operated on narrow bands they considered primitive. They spoke about our sensory limitations the way engineers discuss outdated technology. Ria watched her team's faces tighten. The linguist's shoulders slumped. The engineer's confident posture deflated. You could see years of professional pride dissolving under clinical assessment. We weren't just aliens to them. We were neurologically simple organisms trying to comprehend concepts beyond our evolutionary development. The city itself demonstrated the gap. Bioluminescent patterns shifted in ways our eyes couldn't fully track. Harmonics resonated at frequencies our ears registered only as pressure changes. Even the material composition of structures involved matter. States our instruments could detect, but our brains couldn't conceptualize. We were surrounded by reality our biology filtered into meaningless noise. Ria's expression changed first. The defeat in her eyes hardened into something else. You could see her recalibrating. If technology couldn't bridge this gap and biology couldn't be overcome, then something else was needed. The clinical assessment became challenge rather than verdict. She started watching the sisters more closely. Not their words, but their patterns. How they moved through the environment. How the city responded to their presence. The slight pauses in their speech that correlated with light shifts in the walls. The way their hands moved in subtle gestures that mirrored vibrational patterns. The insult transformed in that moment. Where the crew heard condemnation, Ria heard parameters. Their assessment defined the boundaries of possibility. If they believed human neural architecture couldn't comprehend their reality, then demonstrating otherwise would force reevaluation. The limitations became a checklist for unexpected capability. She began mentally assembling fragments. The failed translation data, the environmental sensor readings, even the helium-affected vocal patterns that had seemed like obstacles, now presented potential advantages. The very things they considered limitations might become tools. The crew noticed her shift in posture. The straightened spine, the focused attention. You could see confidence returning through osmosis. If the captain believed there was a path forward, maybe there was. The weight of biological determinism lifted slightly. Ria's eyes tracked the harmonic patterns in the walls, then the sisters' vocal inflections, then the city's responsive pulses. She wasn't trying to understand their language anymore. She was learning their music. The difference proved critical. You don't need to comprehend symphony to play the right notes. The assessment that should have ended contact became its catalyst. By defining our limitations so precisely, they showed exactly what needed to be overcome. Ria stopped seeing biological constraints and started looking for exceptions. Every rule has its edge cases. Humanity's entire history suggested we specialized in being the exception. Ria's eyes didn't leave the sisters. She absorbed every vocal inflection, every subtle harmonic shift in their speech. The failed translation software had left fragments on her display. Broken phrases, half-interpreted syntax trees, error logs filled with grammatical impossibilities. She ignored the red warnings and focused on the patterns beneath the errors. The algorithms had missed the musicality. Athrani language wasn't just words with tonal changes. It was structured around harmonic intervals. Sentences followed melodic contours more than grammatical rules. The software tried to force their speech into subject-verb-object cages, when it should have been analyzing frequency relationships and rhythmic patterns. Her own helium-affected voice became an advantage. The higher pitch actually matched certain Athrani vocal ranges better than natural human speech. The squeaky quality helped her hit precise tonal intervals that normal voices couldn't reach cleanly. What we'd considered a comic impediment turned out to be a phonetic gift. She pieced together phrases from the wreckage of our translation attempts. A formal greeting structure from one fragment, honorific patterns from another, cadence templates from the city's own harmonic hum. She wasn't constructing sentences so much as composing music with meaning embedded in the frequencies. The grammar lived in the spaces between notes. The crew watched her silently. You could feel the tension in the way people held their breath. The security team's hands rested near their equipment, not threatening but ready. The science officer's fingers hovered over his recorder. The linguist watched Ria's lips move silently as she rehearsed. This wasn't just a communication attempt, it was a refutation of their entire assessment of us. The risk was absolute. If she failed, we'd confirm every limitation they described to us. Primitive cognitive matrices, neurological constraints, biological inadequacy. 7 years of preparation would end with us as just another footnote in their galactic catalog. But if she succeeded, Ria stepped forward. The movement was deliberate, not aggressive. She positioned herself where the acoustics focused sound best, in a spot where the floor patterns converged. She took one slow breath, the helium-rich air making her already lightheaded. The sisters continued their conversation, still ignoring us as insignificant. Her first syllable cut through their dialogue. Not loud, but precise. The tone hit a specific frequency that made the nearest wall pattern flash blue. She spoke 3 phrases in full Athrani formality. Her voice squeaky but perfectly pitched. The sentences flowed with harmonic structure, each word landing with exact tonal resonance. The sisters stopped talking, just cut off mid-sentence. The city's constant humming dropped into sudden silence. The bioluminescent patterns froze in place, light arrested mid-pulse. For 3 heartbeats, nothing moved. The air itself felt still, like the whole environment was holding its breath. Every crew member stood perfectly motionless. You could hear the faint hiss of climate control in our suits. The medical officer's monitor beeped once, then went silent as she thumbed the mute control. We watched the sisters' faces, waiting for any reaction. Offense, amusement, dismissal? The city's harmonics returned at a different frequency. Lower, softer, with a curious upward lilt at the end of each cycle. The light patterns began moving again, but slower, more deliberate. They pulsed in time with Ria's breathing rather than their previous independent rhythm. The sisters turned toward Ria in perfect synchronization. Their movements were fluid, elegant, completely unhurried. Where before they'd regarded us with detached academic interest, now their attention held focused intensity. The condescension in their posture gave way to something else. Not quite respect yet, but definite reassessment. Ria remained standing exactly where she'd spoken, her posture relaxed but alert. She didn't smile or show triumph, just waited. The gamble was made. Now we'd see if the house paid out or took everything. The last syllable hung in the air, perfectly pitched. Ria's voice, still helium-high but now carrying formal Athrani inflection patterns, completed the introduction. The sound didn't echo. It got absorbed by the sudden stillness. The sisters cut off mid-word. One had been describing cognitive limitations of another species. The other was responding about neural architecture constraints. Their voices vanished like switches flipped. The city's constant background hum dropped to near silence. Not quiet, silence. The kind that feels heavier than sound. Pulsing lights froze in place. Bioluminescent patterns that had been flowing like liquid energy became still images. The chamber looked like a video paused mid-frame. Even the subtle air currents seemed to stop moving. The temperature held perfectly constant, none of the slight fluctuations we'd grown used to. 3 heartbeats. That's how long the stillness lasted. Mine, Ria's, the engineers next to me. You could count them in the sudden void of noise. The suit monitors showed everyone's heart rate spiking, then dropping sharply as breathing stopped. The crew became statues. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The medical officer had her hand half raised toward her comm switch. The linguist had been taking notes. His stylus hovered centimeters above his pad. We were all waiting to see if we'd just committed the biggest diplomatic insult in human history, or pulled off the miracle we needed. Even the helium effect seemed to pause. Our voices normally had that squeaky quality from the atmospheric isotopes, but in that silence the air itself felt different, less reactive. Like the city was holding its breath along with us. The sisters turned slowly. Not like humans turn. No shifting of weight, no adjustment of stance. They rotated toward Ria with seamless grace, their movement perfectly synchronized. This was the first time they'd faced us directly. Before, they'd been angled toward each other, including us only as subjects of discussion. Their expressions changed. The condescending amusement vanished. The academic detachment melted away. What replaced it was measured assessment, but different from before. This wasn't evaluation of specimens anymore. This was recognition of capability. The first sister's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion but in recalculating. You could see her processing the impossibility. Her partner's head tilted exactly 5 degrees, a gesture that might have been curiosity in human terms. The city's hum returned, but different. Lower frequency, warmer tone. The light patterns began moving again, but slower, more deliberate. They pulsed in time with Ria's breathing now instead of their previous independent rhythm. Ria didn't move. She held her position, maintaining eye contact with the first sister. Her posture stayed relaxed but alert. No triumph in her expression, no nervousness either. Just steady waiting. She'd made her move. Now it was their turn. The air lost that charged feeling. The pressure normalized. You could hear the faint hiss of suit circulators again as people remembered to breathe. The medical officer's monitor beeped softly once. Then she muted it quickly. The second sister spoke first. Her voice wasn't dismissive anymore. It carried formal tones that matched Ria's greeting. The words were still untranslatable, but the inflection had changed completely. Where before they'd been discussing us, now they were addressing us. The power dynamic in the chamber shifted palpably. We weren't specimens behind glass anymore. We'd become unexpected participants. The city's architecture seemed to acknowledge the change. Platforms adjusted their height slightly. Light patterns focused differently on our group. Ria gave a slight nod. Nothing exaggerated. The kind of acknowledgement equals might exchange. Her gamble had paid off. Not just the language attempt, but the timing, the tonal precision, even the helium-enhanced vocal range. Every factor came together to force a reassessment. The second sister spoke first, her voice carrying formal harmonics that resonated through the chamber. She identified herself as Lion of the Deep Harmonics. The title wasn't just a name, it was a descriptor, a role, a function within their society. The words translated roughly through our damaged software, but the meaning carried weight beyond the syllables. Deep harmonics suggested fundamental forces, the underlying music of reality itself. Her sister followed, introducing herself as Kithra of the Singing Stones, another title that implied specialization rather than general identity, not just a person, but a person who worked with specific aspects of their world. The Singing Stones likely referred to the city's crystalline structures that responded to sound. Their roles suggested a society organized around acoustic manipulation, rather than technology or politics. These weren't casual introductions. The formal tone, the precise harmonics, the way the city's patterns shifted to frame them, this was ceremonial recognition. They weren't just telling us their names. They were revealing their functions within a complex social structure. Deep harmonics and singing stones implied a civilization built around specific sonic specialties, each with defined purposes and responsibilities. Their response to Ria's gambit carried measured respect. The aristocratic restraint remained. This wasn't sudden friendship, but the condescension vanished. They acknowledged her achievement with the careful tone of masters recognizing an apprentice's unexpected breakthrough. The assessment continued, but now it evaluated potential rather than limitations. The power dynamic shifted palpably. Where before we'd been specimens under observation, now we became unexpected contestants who'd beaten the house. They still held advantages, knowledge, technology, home turf, but we'd proven we could play the game. The conversation changed from assessment to exploration of capabilities. Lion's voice carried new curiosity when she spoke next. She asked about Ria's learning process, the methods behind her linguistic breakthrough. The question itself acknowledged that humanity might have value beyond mere entertainment. Our persistence against biological limitations became interesting rather than pathetic. The city's harmonics changed frequency. The background hum softened, becoming warmer, more welcoming. Light patterns pulsed in slower, more relaxed rhythms. Platforms adjusted their heights to be more comfortable for human stature. The environment itself responded to the shifted relationship, adapting to accommodate rather than simply observe. First contact transformed in that moment. What began as scientific assessment became mutual recognition. They saw us not as primitive organisms, but as capable beings who'd overcome our limitations through cleverness and risk. We saw them not as omnipotent observers, but as specialists with defined roles within a larger system. The crew's posture changed. Shoulders straightened, chins came up. The defensive huddle relaxed into more open stances. People stopped watching their equipment so closely and started watching the sisters directly. The tension didn't vanish. It evolved into something more productive, more collaborative. Lion gestured toward the central chamber, her movement fluid and inviting. The previous assessment was over. Now came the real work, discovering what humanity could contribute to their understanding of the universe. The galactic catalog remained, but our entry was being rewritten in real time. The city's song continued, but now it included space for our voices. The harmonics created openings where human vocal ranges could participate. The environment became less intimidating, more interactive. What had been a test was becoming a conversation, however halting and imperfect. Rhea responded with a slight bow, not subservient, but respectful. Her voice still squeaked from the helium, but now the quality seemed charming rather than ridiculous. The sisters' expressions held something close to amusement, but the kind you share with equals rather than display toward inferiors. We moved forward together, the sisters leading but not commanding. The path through the city changed, platforms forming at more comfortable intervals, steps adjusting to human stride lengths. The assessment was complete. Now came the interesting part, discovery. Lion gestured toward the crystalline walls as she explained. The patterns weren't decoration, they were displays. Each pulsing light represented a star system under observation. The harmonic hum wasn't ambiance, it was data transmission. This structure wasn't a city at all. It was a living observatory cataloging everything in their galactic sector. They hadn't been hiding from other species. They'd been studying us all along. Thousands of civilizations logged and analyzed across millennia. Their database contained evolutionary records, cultural developments, technological progressions. Humanity represented just one more entry in an unimaginably vast collection. We weren't discovering them. We'd finally triggered our own file activation. The crew processed this silently. Our linguist stared at the pulsing patterns with dawning comprehension. Each rhythm represented a species being monitored. Each color shift indicated civilization status changes. The medical officer touched her temple like she was checking her own thoughts were still private. 7 years preparing for first contact, and we were just checking in at the reception desk. First contact protocols suddenly seemed childish. The formal greetings, the cultural exchange packages, the carefully prepared speeches, all meaningless when the other party already knows your entire history. They'd watched humanity evolve from primitive tool users to spacefarers. Our greatest achievements were just data points in their ongoing analysis. Lion demonstrated how the system worked. She gestured toward a particular light pattern, and the wall resolved into detailed information about a species we'd never encountered. Biological specifications, language structures, technological capabilities. The data flowed in real time, updating as she watched. They weren't studying history. They were monitoring current development across the sector. The scale of their operation became apparent. This single structure tracked thousands of civilizations simultaneously. The harmonic frequencies carried information across interstellar distances without time lag. Their observation methods made our telescopes and probes look like children's toys. We'd been scanning stars while they were watching civilizations. Our entire expedition shifted perspective. The tension, the fear, the wonder, all based on the assumption we were pioneers making first contact. Instead, we were late arrivals to a party that had been going on for millennia. The Athrani weren't mysterious aliens. They were curators of the largest library in known space. Rhea asked the obvious question, why observe without contacting? Lion's response carried mild surprise. Contact wasn't the point. Understanding was. They studied species development patterns, cultural evolution, technological progression. Interaction contaminated the data. Our arrival had forced an exception to their standard protocols. The realization hit that our history might be completely recorded here. Every war, every discovery, every cultural shift, all logged and analyzed. The medical officer asked if they had records of specific Earth events. Lion confirmed they did, with the casual tone of someone confirming they have yesterday's weather data. Our value shifted in that moment. We weren't primitive specimens anymore. We'd become active participants. Our unexpected linguistic breakthrough made us interesting rather than predictable. The file on humanity was being updated from passive observation to interactive study. The Galactic catalog now had a new classification category. The sisters seemed genuinely intrigued by our reaction to this revelation. Most species they observed never discovered the observation system. Those who did typically responded with fear or aggression. Our mixture of awe, curiosity, and dark humor was apparently novel. Our entertainment value increased with every stunned expression. The city's harmonics changed to accommodate our new status. The patterns became more interactive, responding to our movements and questions. Where before we'd been moving through a museum exhibit, now we were browsing the archives. The shift from observed to observers happened gradually but completely. Lion offered limited access to non-sensitive data. The wall displays shifted to show information about neighboring civilizations, not complete files, just enough to demonstrate the scope of their catalog. We saw species with biological structures that defied physics, cultures built around concepts we couldn't comprehend, technologies that operated on principles we'd never imagined. The crew's professional training reasserted itself. The science officer started asking specific questions about observation methods. The linguist inquired about data organization systems. The engineer examined the energy transmission patterns. We stopped being overwhelmed and started being scientists again, just with a much larger laboratory. The Athrani seemed pleased with this transition. Our shift from shock to analytical curiosity matched their own operational parameters. The interaction became less about revelation and more about information exchange. They'd revealed the truth of their existence, and we'd accepted it with more grace than most. Lion gestured toward a section of the crystalline display wall. The patterns resolved into our entry in their galactic catalog. The heading read Homo sapiens, followed by a classification that roughly translated as unpredictably entertaining. The subheading noted above, average survival instincts contradict cognitive limitations. It was like reading your own performance review written by amused gods. The description detailed our species' puzzling behaviors, our inexplicable fondness for generating unnecessary noise, music, conversation, background sounds even when unnecessary. Our tendency toward illogical optimism in statistically hopeless situations. Our habit of forming emotional attachments to inanimate objects and conceptual abstractions. Each observation was clinically accurate, yet completely missed the point of being human. The crew's reaction split down the middle. Half looked offended at being classified as entertainment. The other half found it darkly hilarious. Our cultural attaché muttered about reductive anthropological frameworks, while the engineer chuckled at the noise-making comment. The medical officer just nodded at the survival instincts notation like she'd suspected as much all along. This classification explained why they'd engaged with us at all. Most species they observed never triggered interaction protocols. Our combination of persistent noise-making and unexpected problem-solving made us interesting enough to warrant deviation from standard procedure. We weren't important, we were entertaining. The cosmic equivalent of an interesting distraction. The entry contained specific examples of human unpredictability. Our habit of developing advanced technology, then using it for trivial purposes. Our tendency to prioritize artistic expression over practical efficiency. Our willingness to risk everything on statistically improbable gambles. Each note was accompanied by observational data spanning centuries of human history. Lion seemed amused by our mixed reactions. She clarified that entertainingly unpredictable represented high praise in their assessment system. Most species developed along predictable evolutionary paths. Humanity's chaotic development pattern made us fascinating to study. Our file received more attention than many supposedly more advanced civilizations. The power dynamic shifted again, but differently this time. We weren't equals and we weren't specimens. We were interesting anomalies worth cultivating. Our value lay in our ability to surprise, to defy expectations, to generate unexpected outcomes. The very qualities that made us frustrating to deal with made us valuable to study. Keithra proposed limited collaboration, not technology exchange or formal alliance. They wanted to study our unpredictability in controlled environments, joint problem-solving exercises, cultural exchange experiments. They'd provide the framework. We'd provide the chaotic human element. The setup felt like being asked to perform laboratory tricks, but the potential benefits were real. The crew's professional pride warred with pragmatic opportunity. Being called entertainingly unpredictable stung. But access to Athrani knowledge could advance human science by centuries. The chance to study their observation methods alone outweighed the bruising to our collective ego. Sometimes you take the backhanded compliment if the door it opens is valuable enough. Ria negotiated terms with careful precision. She accepted the collaborative framework but insisted on reciprocal study. If they wanted to observe human unpredictability, we got to study their predictive models. The exchange became two-way research rather than one-way observation. The sisters agreed with what might have been approval in their culture. The city's harmonics shifted to a more collaborative frequency. The light patterns formed what looked like flowcharts of proposed experimental designs. The environment itself adapted to frame the new relationship. Platforms arranged themselves into what might have been laboratory spaces or testing arenas. The transition from assessment to collaboration happened smoothly. Humanity's cosmic status got unofficially upgraded. We went from primitive specimens to interesting test subjects. Not quite peers, but not mere data points either. Our file and their galactic catalog updated in real time. The classification shifting to include potential collaborative value, alongside entertainingly unpredictable. It wasn't the first contact scenario we'd imagined, but it was better than being ignored. Sometimes being the class clown gets you noticed by the teachers. Lion gestured to the empty air between platforms. Ingredients materialized from harmonic convergence. Crystalline vegetables, protein structures that pulsed with internal light, liquids that flowed against gravity. They hung suspended in patterns that matched the city's background hum. No fire, no pans, no traditional cooking methods. Just precise vibrational manipulation. The vegetables began shimmering at specific frequencies. Each type required different resonant patterns. Root vegetables needed deep bass tones. Leafy greens responded to higher pitches. Proteins required complex harmonic intervals. The Athrani didn't cook, they tuned food like instruments. Temperature control came from molecular vibration rather than thermal transfer. Dishes assembled themselves mid-air. Components drifted toward each other along sonic pathways. Sauces flowed in intricate patterns that maximized flavor contact surfaces. Garnishes arranged themselves into fractal patterns that optimized aroma release. Every movement followed musical timing, with ingredients arriving at precise moments in the harmonic sequence. Molecular manipulation happened through frequency control. Our scanners showed bonds forming and breaking at the quantum level. Flavors weren't just combined, they were engineered. Compounds that normally required hours of cooking formed instantaneously under specific vibrational frequencies. Maillard reactions occurred without heat, caramelization without sugar breakdown. The first taste defied description. Flavors unfolded in phases across the tongue, each note hitting at different times. Some sensations registered as colors in the mind rather than tastes. Others triggered memories that weren't ours. The medical officer's biosensors showed neural activity patterns normally associated with profound aesthetic experiences. This wasn't eating. It was sensory immersion. Our understanding of physics shifted with each course. The engineers stared at their scanners in disbelief. Molecular bonds forming and breaking through sound alone. Quantum states manipulated without energy transfer. The Athrani were demonstrating control over matter at levels we considered theoretical. Their cooking technology made our warp drives look primitive. The demonstration served multiple purposes. Nutritional optimization, cultural exchange, and capability display all wrapped together. Each dish showcased different aspects of their control over reality. One course demonstrated precise gravitational manipulation. Another showed quantum entanglement applications. The dessert course involved flavors that changed based on the eater's emotional state. Food became the perfect diplomatic medium. Everyone eats. The universal experience of nourishment provided common ground where language failed. The sisters watched our reactions with genuine interest. Our varied responses to the same dishes provided more data about human neurology than any scanner could capture. The meal was both generosity and research. The crew's resistance melted with each course. Professional detachment gave way to wonder. The security chief forgot to monitor threats, absorbed in a broth that tasted like childhood memories. The engineer abandoned his scanners to experience a vegetable that changed texture with each chew. Even the most skeptical among us surrendered to the experience. Ria engaged the sisters while we ate. She discussed flavor perceptions across species, nutritional requirements in different environments, the cultural significance of shared meals. The conversation flowed more naturally over food. The helium in our voices seemed less ridiculous when discussing culinary experiences. Laughter came easier between bites of impossible flavors. The meal concluded with a shared dessert that responded to group mood. The substance shifted texture and flavor based on collective emotional states. When we laughed, it became light and effervescent. During serious discussion, it turned rich and complex. The city's harmonics mirrored these changes, creating feedback loops between food and environment. We left the meal changed, not just by the experience itself, but by the implications. If they could manipulate matter this precisely for something as simple as food, their other capabilities were beyond imagination. The demonstration accomplished what hours of conversation couldn't. It made their advancement tangible rather than theoretical. Sometimes the most advanced technology isn't weapons or engines, it's lunch. Cuthra gestured to the shimmering ingredients suspended before us. The vegetables pulsed with soft light. The proteins shifted colors rhythmically. The liquids flowed in patterns that suggested intention. She explained this wasn't just food preparation, it was temporary consciousness elevation. The harmonic frequencies they applied during cooking didn't just alter molecular structures. They awakened latent awareness in the ingredients themselves. The concept hit like a physical blow. Our medical officer actually took a step back. The vegetables we'd been eating had been momentarily conscious. The sauces had possessed awareness during their preparation. The entire meal represented a parade of temporary sentience created for our consumption. The ethical implications scrambled human moral frameworks. This temporary consciousness served practical purposes beyond philosophy. Awakened ingredients optimized their own flavor profiles during preparation. They adjusted molecular structures to enhance taste and nutritional value. Proteins rearranged themselves for perfect texture. Vegetables amplified their most beneficial compounds. The food actively participated in its own improvement. The crew split into immediate debate. Our cultural attaché argued this represented unacceptable manipulation of consciousness, however temporary. The engineer countered that human cooking also alters living things. We just do it through crude thermal violence rather than harmonic elevation. The linguist noted that consciousness might not mean the same thing to Athrani as to humans. Lyon clarified the most unsettling part. The ingredients participated willingly. Their agricultural systems involved symbiotic relationships where plants and organisms understood their purpose. The temporary consciousness represented a peak experience for them, a chance to contribute meaningfully before returning to baseline awareness. Death wasn't involved. Transformation was the goal. The sisters watched our philosophical discomfort with what might have been amusement. Their expressions carried the patience of teachers watching students struggle with advanced concepts. They seemed accustomed to this reaction from species with binary views of consciousness. The idea that awareness could be temporary, voluntary, and beneficial clearly wasn't new to them. Rhea asked the crucial question. How did they know the ingredients were willing participants? Cuthra's response involved harmonic memory patterns. The consciousness left imprints on the food that could be read through specific frequencies. These imprints consistently showed satisfaction and purpose fulfillment. The vegetables weren't suffering, they were achieving their highest function. The medical officer requested scans of these consciousness imprints. Her equipment couldn't detect them directly, but it registered the unique energy signatures. The patterns showed consistency across different ingredients, different meals, different preparation sessions. Whatever was happening, it wasn't random or forced. The data suggested systematic voluntary participation. We faced a choice. Reject the concept and potentially insult our hosts after building fragile rapport, or accept that consciousness operated differently here, that their ethical frameworks might be more advanced rather than less moral. The meal sat before us, beautifully prepared, suddenly loaded with philosophical weight. Rhea made the decision for everyone. She took a deliberate bite of the shimmering vegetable medley. Her expression showed concentration, not disgust. She chewed slowly, considering the experience rather than just the taste. After swallowing, she nodded to the sisters with respect rather than enthusiasm. The crew followed her lead. The food still tasted extraordinary, but now with added dimensions. The knowledge of its preparation changed the experience. Each bite carried the weight of philosophical consideration alongside flavor. The meal became both nourishment and education. The sisters seemed pleased with our thoughtful acceptance. They explained this approach represented their general philosophy: elevation through harmony rather than subjugation through force. Their entire civilization operated on principles of voluntary participation and meaningful contribution. The cooking demonstration served as microcosm of their societal values. We finished the meal in contemplative silence. The debate would continue later in private discussions, but for now we accepted the cultural difference. The temporary consciousness concept remained unsettling, but the evidence of voluntary participation made it manageable. Sometimes advancement looks like horror until you understand the context. The city's harmonics shifted to a more relaxed frequency. The light patterns softened. The sisters began explaining other aspects of their culinary traditions, moving past the philosophical hurdle we'd overcome. The meal continued now with deeper understanding on both sides. Our engineer tried explaining human humor using the translation software. It did not go well. He told a simple joke about 3 engineers walking into a bar. Basic setup, predictable punchline. The Athrani sisters stared blankly as the system spit out error messages about incompatible cultural reference frameworks. The software tried breaking down the joke's structure. It analyzed the setup, identified the comedic pattern, even explained the surprise element. The technical breakdown appeared flawless, but the humor evaporated completely. You can't dissect a joke like a circuit diagram and expect it to still work. The sisters' expression shifted from curiosity to confusion. They attempted to reciprocate. Kathra shared what she clearly considered a hilarious anecdote about harmonic resonance patterns. The translation came through as a dry description of acoustic phenomena, with no discernible punchline. Our crew smiled politely while mentally scrambling for any trace of comedy in the data dump. The cultural gap felt wider than ever. Both sides tried explaining their humor concepts. We gestured about timing and surprise. They demonstrated tonal shifts and rhythmic patterns. The more we talked, the clearer it became that comedy might be the most culturally specific thing imaginable. What makes one species laugh apparently doesn't translate even with perfect technology. The turning point came when Lion attempted a physical gesture she thought might illustrate their comedy. Her movements were so gracefully alien, so completely unexpected, that our medical officer snorted involuntarily. The sound, ridiculous and undignified, broke the tension instantly. Kathra responded with a chiming sound that might have been their version of a chuckle. Suddenly we were all laughing, not at the failed jokes, but at the sheer absurdity of the situation. 12 humans and 2 aliens desperately trying to explain comedy across an evolutionary divide, failing magnificently together. The translation software kept throwing error messages that just made us laugh harder. The city responded to the laughter. The harmonics shifted to warmer frequencies. Light patterns swirled in cheerful spirals. Platforms bobbed slightly like they were joining the amusement. The environment itself seemed to enjoy our shared failure at comedy. The formal atmosphere evaporated completely. Barriers dissolved faster through that shared laughter than through hours of careful diplomacy. Where precise language and advanced technology had failed, simple human amusement succeeded. The sisters' formal posture relaxed into something more natural. Their movements became less precise, more expressive. The aristocratic reserve melted away. We stopped trying to explain humor and just enjoyed the moment. The engineer demonstrated a classic pratfall, not something you'd normally do during first contact, but the circumstances weren't normal anymore. The sisters responded with a floating gesture that made their bodies briefly phase in and out of visibility. Both species found the other's physical comedy hilarious without needing translation. Trust built through that mutual amusement. The careful distance maintained through earlier interactions vanished. Crew members gestured freely. The sisters moved closer. The atmosphere felt like a gathering of friends rather than a diplomatic meeting. All the tension from earlier assessments and classifications just evaporated. The resolution became clear without anyone stating it. Shared laughter proved more effective than any technology. Empathy and amusement created connections where precision failed. We might never fully understand each other's comedy, but we understood the value of trying. The city's harmonics settled into a contented hum that seemed to approve of the development. Later, when formal discussions resumed, the quality had changed completely. The stiffness was gone. References to earlier humorous moments slipped into conversations. The sisters would make a slight chiming sound that meant shared amusement, and we'd respond with smiles. The failed comedy attempt became our foundation rather than our stumbling block. Sometimes not understanding the joke works better than getting it perfectly. Lion gestured toward the crystalline display. Humanity's entry in their galactic catalog updated before our eyes. The classification shifted from unpredictably entertaining to entertaining partners. 2 words that changed our cosmic status completely. The subheading now read, "Demonstrates adaptive problem-solving despite biological constraints." We'd evolved from primitive mayflies to potential collaborators in real time. This wasn't just a label change. It represented genuine progress in their assessment system. The sisters explained that most species never move beyond initial classifications. Our willingness to risk everything on a linguistic gamble, our adaptation to the helium environment, even our awkward attempts at humor, all demonstrated qualities they valued. Persistence against overwhelming odds counted for more than technological advancement. The crew's various skills suddenly gained new significance. Our engineers' constant tinkering with malfunctioning equipment showed creative problem-solving. The medical officer's rapid adaptation to alien biology demonstrated flexibility. Even the security team's protective formations indicated valuable protective instincts. Where they'd seen limitations before, they now saw specialized capabilities. Our entertainment value expanded to include collaborative potential. The sisters noted our tendency to approach problems from unexpected angles. While their methods relied on precise harmonic calculations, we employed intuitive leaps and illogical connections. Our chaotic thought processes complemented their structured approaches. What made us unpredictable also made us useful. They proposed limited exchange programs, not technology transfers or military alliances, joint research initiatives where human creativity could test their predictive models, problem-solving exercises where our illogical approaches might reveal solutions their perfect logic missed. The framework felt like being hired as creative consultants to a vast scientific institution. Ria negotiated the terms with careful precision. She ensured reciprocal benefits, access to their observational data in exchange for our participation. The agreement specified equal standing in any collaborative discoveries. The sisters accepted with what might have been respect. Our insistence on mutual value demonstrated further unexpected sophistication. Humanity became co-learners in a galactic ecosystem we'd barely known existed. The scale of their operation became apparent as they showed us other collaborative species. We weren't unique, but we were among the few who'd earned partnership status through demonstration rather than technological parity. Our value lay in our minds, not our machines. The city's harmonics shifted to accommodate the new relationship. The background hum incorporated human vocal ranges. Light patterns formed collaborative diagrams. Platforms adjusted to better suit our physical needs. The environment itself recognized our changed status, becoming more interactive and responsive. We were no longer visitors, we were participants. The sisters' demeanor changed completely. The aristocratic reserve gave way to professional curiosity. They began asking specific questions about human cognitive processes, how we managed intuitive leaps, why we valued illogical art forms, what drove our persistence against statistical improbability. The assessment continued, but now as colleagues studying interesting phenomena together. Limited information exchanges began immediately. They showed us non-sensitive data about neighboring civilizations. We shared basic information about human cultural development. The flow wasn't equal. They had infinitely more to offer, but the principle of exchange had been established. Small steps toward mutual understanding. The resolution felt both humbling and empowering. We weren't the center of the universe, just one species among thousands. But we'd earned a place at the table through sheer stubbornness and creative thinking. Our entire history of overcoming limitations had prepared us for this moment. Sometimes being the chaotic element in an ordered system has value. The city's eternal song continued, but now it included space for human contributions. The harmonics created openings where our unpredictable thinking could insert new variations. The music of the spheres gained additional improvisational notes. We left Zera not as conquerors or supplicants, but as junior partners in a conversation that would continue for generations. Our shuttle lifted from Zera's surface, the city's crystalline structures fading into the perpetual ice. The crew sat in silence, watching the world shrink below us. That humming city, that living observatory continued its eternal work. We weren't leaving as visitors anymore. We'd become notes in its endless song. The perspective shift hit everyone differently. Our science officer stared at his instruments with new understanding. The medical officer kept touching her temple like checking her thoughts were still her own. The linguist watched the translation log scroll, seeing not errors now but possibilities. 7 months ago we'd left Earth as explorers. We returned as participants in something vastly larger. Humanity gained cosmic context. We weren't the center of anything, just one species among thousands. But we'd earned a place at the table through stubbornness and creative thinking. The Athrani would continue their eternal cataloging, their observation of countless civilizations. But now our file was active, our contributions welcomed. The Galactic database had a new source of unpredictable data. The city's song incorporated our presence permanently. Our linguistic patterns, our problem-solving methods, even our failed humor attempts, all became part of their records. The harmonics we'd heard would forever include human elements. We left physical footprints in ice, but metaphysical impressions in their eternal chorus. First contact transformed from assessment to mutual education. They'd studied us, yes, but we'd studied them right back. Learned their harmonic principles. Adapted to their environment. Even their cooking techniques revealed deeper truths about their civilization. The learning went both ways. However uneven the knowledge exchange, the universe appeared richer through this lens. Not just stars and planets, but relationships and conversations spanning light years. Civilizations weren't isolated phenomena, but interconnected patterns in a cosmic tapestry. Our solitary human journey suddenly felt part of a grander narrative we'd only begun to comprehend. Unexpected alliances began forming right there on the ice. The shared laughter over failed jokes, the mutual respect from Ria's linguistic gamble, the collaborative spirit during the culinary exchange. These moments built bridges where formal diplomacy would have failed. Sometimes the smallest connections hold the most weight. Our shuttle cleared the atmosphere, Zira becoming a blue-white marble below. The crew remained quiet, everyone processing in their own way. The security chief finally broke the silence. They called us entertainingly unpredictable. A few smiles appeared. The engineer added, better than being predictably boring. The tension broke. Laughter returned, easier this time. We watched the stars with new understanding. Each point of light might host civilizations unknown, species with their own stories, their own struggles against limitations. The Athrani weren't unique, just one example of what might be out there. The universe felt both larger and more intimate somehow. The city's final transmission reached us as we entered orbit, a harmonic pattern that our translation software barely decoded, not words but music, a composition that incorporated elements of our voices, our laughter, even the squeaky helium tones. Their eternal song now contained human notes, forever part of their chorus. Ria played the transmission through the ship's speakers. We listened to ourselves reflected through alien artistry, our struggles, our triumphs, our awkward attempts at communication, all transformed into something beautiful. The medical officer wiped her eyes discreetly. The engineer nodded slowly, appreciation in his expression. We set course for home, but nothing felt the same. Earth would still be there with its politics and problems, but we carried back a seismic shift in human perspective. We weren't alone, and we never had been. The cosmos was watching, cataloging, studying, and now finally we were participating. The stars outside looked different. Not just distant suns, but potential neighbors. Each system might host civilizations living their own stories, facing their own challenges. The Athrani had given us the greatest gift possible, context. We understood our place in things now, small but significant, limited but learning. Our ship hummed through the void, carrying 12 changed people home. Behind us, Zira continued its eternal work. The city's song played on, now with human elements woven into its harmonies. We'd arrived as uncertain visitors. We left as notes in a cosmic chorus that would continue long after we were gone. The music plays on, and now we're part of it. Ria replayed the audio recording on her private terminal. That single Athrani sentence hung in the quiet of her cabin, each syllable perfectly formed. She listened to her own voice, still helium-affected but carrying unfamiliar harmonics that shouldn't have been possible. The gamble looked different in retrospect. More reckless, more necessary. The linguistics team's analysis confirmed it shouldn't have worked. Their software had mapped 12 separate grammatical violations in her statement. The tonal inflections exceeded documented Athrani speech patterns by 19%. The harmonic intervals between words broke established rules of their musical syntax. By every theoretical measure, her attempt should have been meaningless noise. Her success came from ignoring the technology and trusting observation. While the software tried to force their language into human linguistic boxes, she'd watched the sisters themselves, their subtle hand movements that mirrored vocal harmonics, the way light patterns in the walls pulsed in time with specific syllables. She'd learned their music rather than their grammar. The helium isotopes, initially a comic hindrance, proved crucial. Normal human vocal ranges couldn't hit the precise high-frequency intervals required for formal Athrani address. The squeaky quality pushed her voice into registers that cleanly carried the necessary harmonics. What we'd considered atmospheric contamination became an accidental advantage. Human improvisation defeated expectations built over millennia of observation. The sisters later admitted they'd never encountered a species that adapted so rapidly to their environment. Most civilizations confronted with such biological limitations either retreated or attempted technological compensation. We'd leaned into our constraints and turned them into tools. That moment became foundational in first contact literature. Linguistics departments rewrote their curricula. Xenocultural studies added entire chapters on adaptive communication. The recording itself became required listening for diplomacy trainees, not for the words themselves, but for what they represented, breaking rules nobody knew could be broken. The sisters shared their perspective during our final communications. They'd observed countless species across centuries. None had ever overcome such significant neural limitations through pure improvisation. Our willingness to risk complete failure impressed them more than any technological achievement could have. Sometimes the bold move works because it's so unexpected. Humanity's value revealed itself in that moment, not in our technology or biological advantages, but in our stubborn refusal to accept limitations. When confronted with impossible barriers, we don't stop. We find another path. That quality, more than anything else, earned us partnership status. The gamble transformed everything. Not just the mission outcome, but human cosmic identity. We went from being just another observed species to active participants in galactic affairs. That single sentence opened doors no amount of technological advancement could have unlocked. It proved our greatest asset wasn't our hardware, but our unpredictability. Rhea still keeps that recording, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Sometimes the rules are just suggestions. Sometimes the obstacle is the path. And sometimes when everyone tells you something can't be done, that's exactly when you should try doing it. The linguistic breakthrough became our calling card. Later encounters with other species often began with, "You're the ones who spoke Athrani without the neural architecture." Our reputation for creative problem-solving spread faster than our technology ever could. The galaxy noticed not what we had, but how we thought. That moment on the ice defined us more than centuries of space exploration. We weren't the strongest or most advanced species out there, but we might have been the most stubborn. And in a universe full of logical, predictable civilizations, that stubbornness became our greatest advantage. The recording ends with that perfect silence afterward. The 3 heartbeats of stillness where everything changed. You can hear the exact moment human cosmic identity shifted, not with a bang or a flashy display, but with a squeaky voice speaking impossible words into frozen air. Sometimes the biggest revolutions start with the smallest sounds. That crunch of frozen glass beneath Rhea's boots became the first note in an interstellar duet. She stepped forward when protocol demanded silence and spoke words that shouldn't have worked. The universe doesn't always reward caution. Sometimes it favors the voice that breaks the rules, the mind that sees a path where none should exist. Our greatest leaps forward start as gambles that fail on paper. Unbreakable bonds sometimes form from the shards of broken expectations. Remember that the next time you're told something can't be done, someone has to be the first to try.